All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Truckee Fire's 2026 Defensible Space Contractor Training. Are you guys seeing me or are you seeing a screen that says welcome? This is Truckee Fire screen. Perfect. Okay. Now I need to find myself again. Sorry, bear with me. Okay. We're good. Okay. So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sophia Houston. I'm a wildfire prevention specialist with Truckee Fire. We're super excited to have you all here today and focus on the specifics of the great defensible space work you guys do in our community and how you can integrate maybe some more things and more programs that we are offering into the great work that you do. So, we will go ahead and get into it. I'll pass it over to Eric to introduce the team and just start us off. Oh, actually, prior to that, for once we get started with the presentation, you're gonna go ahead and utilize the Q&A, or if you'd like to ask a question verbally, you can raise your hand. But the Q&A is a great feature. We'll have that open. You can type a question in there and we'll either respond in there or we'll pause to address your question. If it's something that we're planning on addressing after you've answered it in our slides, we'll wait till then, and if there's anything we haven't covered, we'll get to that at the end of the presentation. All right, I will pass it over to Eric.
Great. Well, thanks for the introduction, Sophia. And again, appreciate all you guys being on here, giving us the opportunity to keep our contractors trained up on defensible space, home hardening, and kind of everything we have going on at Truckee Fire and with our program. So just quick introductions. This is our team. We're sitting with our Wildfire Prevention Division at 5. So you have myself, Eric Hornvet, the Wildfire Prevention Manager, our Forester, Dylan. And then on this call today, you have Maria, Sophia, and Brittany. Then, of course, the people you guys meet the most in the field is our team of seasonal defensible space inspectors who will be starting here later in April. So that's the team that will be out here and available to work with you all as we support our residents getting a bunch of work done through contractors. So all this whole group should know is funded by Measure T. So just as a quick overview, this is a special tax that was voted in by Truckee voters in 2021, giving our Wildfire Prevention Division about $4 million a year. And kind of some of our major programs are addressing structure ignitability so we can race towards wildfire resilience. So as you all know, we have a ton of programs, probably close to $1.5 or $2 million a year, going into defensible space, Firewise, green waste, and all the programs we have to let the community get all this great work done. Our fire district is long and linear, so hopefully this whole group knows where you are, but pretty much everything that associates with Truckee or Donner Summit is us. So we extend our western boundary at that Highway 20 interchange through all of Donner Summit, Sugar Bowl, Serene Lakes, Boreal, Donner Lake, Tahoe Donner in partnership with the HOA, and then through kind of all of central Truckee, Martis Valley, Glenshire, and then including a couple of islands of Hobart Mills and Floreston as well. So if you're in any of those areas working with Truckee Fire or our HOA partners, you're in the right spot.
All right, so the list of service providers. We get a lot of requests from residents to help them get the work done that we're asking them to do on our inspection reports. And so the goal of the list is to provide defensible space services within the district and help facilitate the utilization of the services that you guys offer for folks who attend our annual training. We are updating this list once a year. So if you're here right now, great. You've done a wonderful job of accessing the only opportunity this year to get on the 2026 list. The form will be made available to you towards the end of this presentation today. So stay on for the entirety of the presentation. And your form entries are going to be due by close of business on Monday, this coming Monday the 13th. So when you do go ahead and enter your information into the form, make sure you triple check your entries. If you have a CSLB license number, there's going to be an option for you to input that there in the form, and we'll be sure to be displaying that for those who provide it. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Eric for some DSpace principles and law updates.
Cool. I'm going to keep this as DSpace law light, but our inspections at Truckee Fire do follow both state, county, and local defensible space requirements. And then when you get into HOAs, they have requirements that need to be more restrictive than those. So an example is in Tahoe Donner, they have a 10-foot zone 0 requirement instead of 5. We also work under some various Senate bills and Assembly bills that have come out, and that would address like our property sale inspections and then also the ever-moving target of zone 0. So with that, zone 0 is still in the works, and I say still because this was literally supposed to be passed in like 2021. But the Board of Forestry at the state level is still meeting. They're currently in litigation from none other than Southern County, who just had major wildfire losses in LA, who is challenging zone 0, not in my backyard type of stuff. So we're still working in limbo mode. Really no changes from Truckee Fire. We've been putting out kind of these best practice inspections that align more with IBHS wildfire prepared home insurance requirements. So we're still going to be looking for common sense defensible space. You guys know where we draw the line, and we'll get into some of that zone 0 stuff later in this slide, but we're just going to be working to manage the risk and allow some reasonable fire resistant landscaping where it makes sense.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So with that talk on kind of the standard that we are inspecting to here in Truckee, we can go ahead and get into the specifics of the kinds of things that we're putting on our reports and the kind of work that you're going to likely be asked to do because of that. So I'll try not to do a super deep dive into the different dispensable space zones, but we're going to start off with zone 0. As it is the most important zone, something we really try to focus on with residents. So zone 0 is that horizontal area 5 feet out from the structure and any attached decks, stairs, outbuildings, etc. This includes beneath stairs and decks. This area greatly reduces the likelihood of ignition of the structure because embers like to accumulate at the base of walls, and combustibles near the structure, vegetative or non-vegetative, can ignite and impact the structure via direct flame contact or radiant heat. So reducing vegetation in the 0 to 5 foot zone nearly doubles the property's wildfire survival rate. So just to give you kind of an understanding of why we are hitting zone 0 so hard. This is what we're trying to avoid here. Stuff too close to the structure that if ignited, it would generate enough heat to cause the structure to ignite. So we're going to try and thoroughly show you guys what we're looking for. We have lots of pictures, included some new pictures with that being some feedback from last year, and just give you a good idea of what we're calling out on our reports and how you can make effective mitigations that we're going to be able to resolve on the back end if we get photos of. So we'll go ahead and get into it. All right, so what counts as zone 0? Like I said, zone 0 is 5 feet off the structure and any attachments to the structure. So this includes things like fences, decks, this little privacy screening here. You can see here we marked a need for additional zone 0 in this photo. Even though they have this nice hardscaping like right along the structure, there's still mulch and pine needles going right up to that attached section of the structure. So, you know, you can figure this out. If fire was creeping around in that mulch and those pine needles, obviously it would reach this combustible attachment, and then if that combustible attachment ignited, it would impact the structure. All right, so we want to make sure that we are raking 5 feet away from the structure. This is a really good example of something we see a lot, just a heavy accumulation of pine needles right there in zone 0. What counts as zone 0? So we want to make sure we are clearing out all grasses and weeds. We might have this great hardscaping that people will put in, but maintenance is still going to be important there, especially it looks like we have some wood siding right there. So we want to make sure that we're still addressing the grasses and weeds that might pop up within that hardscaping. Some more examples here. These ones are a little more obvious. We have some nice big growth of shrubs right up to somebody's softwood deck. So this is a great example of a before and after picture too. We can see the deck that we took a photo of. We could see the hot tub there. We could tell it's the same location on the property the shrub was removed. Another good example of a before and after picture, same angle, pretty self-explanatory there. Another example of zone 0, like we said, any attachments to the home count as zone 0 as well. So even though they have this nice like masonry patio in the back, there's still this big wood pillar that if that growth of manzanita were to ignite, it would most likely impact that wood pillar, which could then cause destruction of the structure. All right, this is important. We want to make sure that in zone 0, we're removing all vegetative debris. So it might not look like much, but this accumulation of pine needles and duff can create these pockets of fuel that would be receptive to embers. So we want to make sure we're being thorough, like look under the decks and porches, between rocks, between boulders, really try to get in there in the nooks and crannies in zone 0 and eliminate the fuel wherever it's possible. So under decks, under stairs, if you can crouch down and reach the accumulation of pine needles and leaves under someone's deck or stairs, then we expect it to be removed. I know it's inconvenient to have to really get in there in the nooks and crannies, but it does make a difference, especially right here. This is a great example of a before and after picture. Again, you're probably starting to notice the theme with the before and after pictures. We just want to make sure that it's the same location on the house. So if you can look at the picture that the inspector took and grab something from the same angle, showing the work that you did, that is much appreciated. Another good photos example. And another example of really just getting in there in the nooks and crannies of boulders on the sides of people's attachments, things like that. Okay, another good example of dead vegetative debris that can accumulate underneath people's decks. Okay. All right, and now we're moving on to vegetative accumulation on the roof and in gutters. It's really important to clear pine needles out of the roof and gutters. These are more great examples of resolution photos, good before and after shots. We understand that sometimes you might clear the pine needles off the roof and it might be a couple days before photos get taken and uploaded. So we would accept photos showing an obvious improvement, but we do have windstorms that can blow pine needles right back onto the roof once work was done. So we try to be reasonable. If there's pine needles on the roof, like you see on the left-hand side, it's a really good little bed of fuel there. If embers were to land in it, they would be able to establish a little fire there. So yeah, trying to be reasonable with pine needles on the roof. We know not everybody has the ability to get up on the roof every couple of days, but we just want to avoid that like little bed of fuel accumulating in those roof corners. Okay, moving on to combustible mulch. Combustible mulch or bark in zone 0 is something we see a lot of, but we are considering the type of material that it's adjacent to. So for example, here you can see that they have this really nice hardscaping, but then the section of wood siding connects directly to the mulch. So if that wall was like metal or concrete, of course, that's not going to be as much of a risk as the wood siding, but we are looking at fire pathways. So if you saw fire creeping around in that mulch, would it then be able to get established via some kind of combustible element of the house and then impact the structure? This is a really good use of mulch. You can see it's nicely contained in a rock wall. It's not up against any vulnerable siding. It's really like doing what it's supposed to do for the plants, but it's also not posing a risk to the structure. Okay, moving on to tree limbs within 10 feet of the structure. This is another one you're going to see pretty frequently. These are also great examples of resolution photos. So we're looking for 10 feet of clearance from the roof, the eaves, decks, and sometimes inspectors will identify the exact limbs that they want you to remove, like you can see here in this picture. But other times, inspectors will draw a circle or an arrow just indicating that 10 feet of clearance is needed. We might miscalculate the length from the roof. You might need more or less clearance once you actually get up there and are looking at the tree and its proximity to the structure. So we trust that once you're up there, you'll be able to see exactly how much needs to be removed in order to achieve the goal of that 10 feet of clearance. So just keep that in mind. All right, another great example of a resolution photo we can see here. It's obviously the same house, and the tree limbs were obviously limbed back to create that good clearance. Okay, next, moving on to zone 0 logs and stumps. So in this picture, we have a really good example of a punky log or a punky stump, sorry, with a lot of dead material. It's falling apart. It looks like it's probably been there for a long time. If we can go up and kick it with our boot and the punky dead material will fall off, we are expecting that to be removed and ground or cut flush. We really want to try and reduce the amount of dead wood, dead material that's available fuel for fire in that zone 0. Outside of zone 0, we are looking for them to be cleaned of any excess debris and surrounding vegetation. So this is a really good example there. Imagine if the stump were to catch fire, if there's anything around them that they could then ignite and create more fire, we want to try and remove. So good example here of a stump that had a good amount of vegetation around it. We asked them to clear around it, and they submitted a great photo showing this nice bare mineral soil around the stump. All right. Do you have any questions so far about zone 0 issues that we'll document frequently?
We had a couple questions from the registration that are related to zone 0 that we might just sort of give some more detail on right now. One of the questions was a clarifying question. Does zone 0 mean no plants at all are allowed within the first 10 feet? So maybe 2 points you want to hit on there, the question of 10 feet and the question of no plants at all.
So zone 0 is 0 to 5 feet. That's what we're talking about here. Outside of zone 0, we don't have the same zero combustible vegetation rules that apply. Then we get into what's called zone 1, which we will address in some slides here in a little bit. As far as no vegetation in zone 0, we are going to get into that right now. Fire resistant landscaping and plant selection. So hopefully that answers some of your questions around that. And if not, feel free to drop another question in the chat.
And we'll just add the 10 feet zone 0 applies in Tahoe Donner, and we do have Tahoe Donner representatives on the call, and they'll be able to speak specifically to their requirements within the HOA.
Thanks, Maria. Cool. Okay, so we talked a bit about what we don't want to see in zone 0, but what is acceptable in zone 0? Can we put any vegetation in zone 0? We don't provide a list of plants that are okay, but rather we're trying to give you just an idea of things that we're looking for. And there's always room for conversation and some nuance if you feel that we've called something out in zone 0 that you believe is unreasonable. But some of the things that we're looking for with plants in zone 0 that we do deem acceptable are plant selection. So types of plants that have high leaf moisture content, low oil or resin content, non-aromatic, very little dead material or potential to accumulate dead material. And then placement is very important as well. So we want enough separation from structures and other vegetation. We'll show you a lot of good examples, as well as making sure that they're not placed like right next to windows, right next to vents, any vulnerable areas of the structure where fire could potentially enter into the home. And we're also wanting to consider the size of the plant at maturity, and then what kind of maintenance is required. Things like water management, pruning, removal of dead material, and how easy is it to maintain the plant. Okay, so some examples of plants that we see in Zone 0 that we don't want to see in Zone 0 here in the Truckee area: manzanita, tobacco brush, dwarf pine, bitter brush, sage. These are examples of volatile plants that, if ignited, would produce a lot of heat. So that's why we don't want to see them in Zone 0. Another thing here, this type of kind of grass tends to accumulate and produce their own dead material and also grow fast. They're already flashy and light fuels, so if they're left unmaintained, which we often see them being unmaintained, it's not a good option in Zone 0. If they dry out, they're going to become really light, flashy fuel. And like I just said, they also, you can even see in this picture on the left here, this looks like there's a little bit of accumulation of dead grass in the base. So that's not a good option in Zone 0. Conifers and pine trees like this one here are a high fire hazard, so the size of the tree really matters. It's something that we're considering. If the tree is only so tall that the entire thing would be stripped bare if you tried to prune branches away from the tree or limb it up, then it's probably going to just end up harming or killing the tree eventually, and it should be just taken out. Larger trees in Zone 0, however, if the canopy is high enough above the structure that you can trim its lower branches and maintain its health to achieve that goal of separation from the structure, then it can stay and just be pruned appropriately. That being said, if you feel that a goal of one of our inspections can be achieved in another way, we understand you guys are tree professionals, and there's always room for conversation around how to achieve the ultimate goal. Okay. This is another example of just poor placement and poor plant selection. We have a young tree here in combustible mulch in Zone 0, close to these low-hanging eaves, and it just doesn't have much room to continue growing without becoming a bigger hazard than it already is. This is another example of, just poor plant selection in Zone 0. Right here, we are allowing plants in Zone 0, like I said, to have very little dead material or accumulation or potential to create that. But some plants, it's like dogs, right? If you have to wear a black uniform to work every day, you're probably not going to want to get a white husky that sheds all the time. So picking the right plant that you know kind of like what to expect from it is really important. Something like this in the photo here, it's going to be producing a lot of dead material and require a lot of maintenance, so not a good option. All right, and we talked a little bit about placement, so this is really important. We want to consider how close they are to vents, low eaves, underneath windows, and near vulnerable siding. We also want to, oh, never mind, sorry, wrong slide. This is a great example of poor placement. You can see these plants have been put right under the deck, as well as right beside the windows. Okay, here we have another good kind of side-by-side example of where something like decorative grasses would be a good option. Out here in the front where it says okay here, they're very much so enclosed by non-combustible materials outside of Zone 0, whereas the ones closer to the house there are growing right up against windows and wood siding. So you can start to get the gist of what we're looking for. The other thing, we want to consider the size of the plant at maturity. If you plant it when it's young and small and harmless but unmaintained, it's going to triple in size and start growing up into the eaves like we see here, then it might not be an ideal plant for Zone 0. This is a great example of proper selection, placement, and maintenance. You can see these plants have been placed next to non-combustible siding. We don't see them beside anything that might be a vulnerable aspect of the home. They're well maintained. You can look at the base. It's like bare mineral soil. And these are not the kinds of plants that are going to be producing a ton of highly combustible debris. Okay, combustibles in zone 0. If you guys are guaranteeing a compliant report to your customers, this might be something that you're asked to take care of. Even though it's not vegetation, it's still something that greatly impacts zone 0 and that we see a lot of. So some examples of combustibles are things like firewood, lumber materials. We'll talk more about firewood, but really any combustibles in zone 0 that we've identified on our report, you might be asked to move outside of zone 0. So an example of combustibles placed under the deck, another good example of a before and after photo here. So with firewood in zone 0, ideally we want firewood more than 30 feet away from the structure, but we understand that's not always an option for people. Another option that we've been recommending to folks is getting a ember resistant tarp. It needs to have the California State Fire Marshal seal of approval on it, as you can see in this sign on the right there. But it's also really important that we are not just throwing a tarp over the firewood all willy-nilly. It needs to be properly tarped, fully covered, tucked in on all sides. And obviously, or not obviously, we don't want to be weighing the tarp down with more firewood. We're really trying, the goal of the tarp, right, is to fully encompass anything that's combustible that could ignite and then impact the structure. So cinder blocks, like shown here, are a great example of something you could use to weigh it down that's non-combustible. And I would even recommend a bigger tarp here. As you can see, there's some firewood exposed there. We want to make sure it's completely tucked in at all sides. Embers are not just going to rain down vertically in the event of a wildfire. They can be blowing from all directions and they can easily fly under that tarp and access that little bit of wood that's exposed. So full coverage is very important. All right, another thing we wanted to touch on quickly here with zone 0 is non-combustible fences. This is most likely going to be something coming down with the new legislation on zone 0 that Eric touched on briefly. So it could be something worth incorporating into your business model, more home hardening retrofits, especially fence replacement. You can see here a combustible fence can transmit fire to the home via an attached gate. And you can replace just that first 5 feet of fencing with non-combustible materials. And that's also something that we would reimburse 50% of the cost up to $2,000 for residents who have that work done with our home hardening rebate. So here's an example of a resident that just decided to replace that little section attaching directly to the structure. Doesn't need to be an entire fence replacement, just trying to break up the pathway of combustible materials to the home. All right, now we're going to get into zone 1 and zone 2. Zone 1 is 5 to 30 feet out and around the structure. The goal here is to just modify the fuels and create some discontinuity between vegetation to reduce the pathway for fire spread as well as the intensity. Zone 2, 30 to 100 feet out and around the structure or to the edge of the property line. Again, we're reducing the potential behavior of an oncoming wildfire, removing dead vegetation, creating adequate separation between trees and shrubs and shrubs and shrubs and trees, and removing ladder fuels. And zone 1 and zone 2 can also help provide a good defensible space for fire personnel to stage and take action, as well as support the functions of zone 0 by reducing flame heights and the potential for ember generation around the structure, like within one's own backyard. So we'll get into some good example photos here. I try to upload this graphic into my inspections personally whenever I document a need for improved shrub and tree spacing. And I'll tell people to reference the graphic for specific specs and guidelines. We want to try and reduce not only horizontal clearance, so here we have on a flat slope 2 times the height of the shrub in horizontal spacing, 10 feet of spacing between trees, as well as vertical spacing. So for example, we'll get into ladder fuels in a bit here, but if a shrub is 3 feet, we're wanting 3 times that in vertical clearance from the lowest hanging branches of the trees. Good example here of fire pathways moving vertically to create more intense fire in the canopies of larger trees. And then you can see that the spacing requirements increase a bit as we start to see an increase in slope. Fire likes to move uphill, so that's the reason for that. If you guys want this graphic, let me know. I can always send it to you in an email, or you can take a screenshot of it if you're watching on your phone right now. But just know I like to upload this into my inspections, and I think it's a really good tool to have for people. Okay, now we're getting into shrub spacing and vegetation in zone 0. So you can see here, we have a pretty, on the left-hand side here, we have a pretty continuous growth of shrubs. And on the right, it looks like they have increased the shrub spacing, but they left vegetation in zone 0. So good job, almost. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have here a really good example of shrub spacing, a mosaic style pattern. You'll see this in our inspections. This is kind of like the language we use with residents. We'll say, we want to see more of a mosaic pattern of spacing or checkerboard style pattern of spacing. Another good example here, you can see the resident had extended their gravel, and even though it's not a full 5 feet, they extended their gravel. They have a little bit of mulch here, but it looks like they reduced the continuity of the shrubs outside of that as well. So now the overall intensity of fire around the home and the pathway that it has towards the structure was reduced. So that overall goal is being met here. Good example of a before and after picture here. Improving shrub spacing also helps with reducing the amount of like other dead accumulated debris that tends to live within those shrubs, like pine needles and pine cones and things like that. So it's a good idea to clear the shrubs out, makes it a lot easier to maintain the ground fuel as well. This is some example of tree spacing. So like we said, we're looking for tree spacing of 10 feet from canopy to canopy. So we see here a really dense cluster of like a lot of young conifers in the front of this house. And then on the right, you can see they made a significant reduction, took a really good picture of same angle, front of the house. So we were stoked on that. Same thing here on the other side of the bear box. Removed those little clusters of young conifers. Ladder fuels, when we talked about vertical separation of fuels, when we're talking about ladder fuels, we're looking at ways that fire can creep around in the ground and then get established in a shrub, and then the shrub gets established in, maybe a smaller tree, or gets established in the low-hanging branches of a larger tree. And once we have fire, torching larger trees, we have a much bigger problem on our hands. So wherever we can reduce that vertical continuity, that vertical pathway for fire is going to be really useful. Another little example, good resolution photo, simply removed the shrub growing right below the low-hanging branches of the tree. Do we have any questions so far about anything that we've been discussing? Okay. All right, limbing the low-hanging branches of trees is another way that we try to reduce ladder fuels. It's not just by taking the shrubs out underneath the trees, but also removing the lower hanging limbs. So you can see here, great example of a before and after picture. The specs that we're looking for on a smaller tree, if the tree itself is like 6 feet, we're obviously not going to tell you to limit up 6 feet. That's more the spec that we operate under with a larger, more mature tree. If it's a smaller tree, we'll just typically tell you to limb 1/3 up the bole or the base of the tree. Another example of ladder fuels. Another example of limbing. Oftentimes our inspectors will try to give you a good visual with a drawing of how high up that we want the tree to be limbed. But just remember that 6 feet for a larger, more mature tree, 1/3 for a smaller tree, where limbing it up 6 feet would not make sense or be a detriment to the tree's health. Okay, important note on tree marking before we transition into a conversation with Tahoe Donner. Truckee Fire does not mark trees, however, Tahoe Donner does mark trees. And there is a little bit of overlap there, like Truckee Fire does STR inspection with Tahoe Donner, within Tahoe Donner. That being said, it's really important to understand the rules of the HOA that you're operating within. Because Tahoe Donner, for example, you do need to get that approval and directive before just going in and removing any trees. So with that said, I'll pass over to Paul Salmon from Tahoe Donner to discuss some Tahoe Donner specifics for you all. And Paul, I can just transition through the slides for you if you'd like. You can tell me next slide.
That sounds good. Perfect.
Okay.
Well, let's go with next slide. I think I had one before this one. Before. Huh.
Oh.
Well, it doesn't really matter. Thank you guys. I'm Paul Salmon with Tahoe Donner Association. I'm the Defensible Space supervisor. And well, thanks for being here today. I'm going to go over some of TDA specifics and parameters, and also some standards and best practices to work here at our association. Next slide, please. Super quick recap. Last year, 2025 season, we inspected around 1,500 properties, including all defensible space and tree removal programs. The brush component was super big last year. You saw fields of brush, of continued brush. This year, you will see some changes. Next slide, please. But first of all, I'm going to make an announcement that I've been asked to make. And this is about some compliance issues that we saw last year regarding heavy equipment, erosion, and access. So number one, reminder, Tahoe Donner rules prohibit work that leaves skid trails, rotting, sediment tracking, erosion runoff, site damage, or improper cleanup in both private lots and association-owned land. And number two, accessing Tahoe Donner property without permission is trespassing. So from those two, just remember this: heavy equipment must stay within approved work limits and leave the site clean, stable, and protected from erosion. And contractors must comply with TD rules, permit conditions, and all applicable grading and erosion requirements. Unfortunately, last year, TD experienced erosion issues at several sites on both private and TDA-owned land, unauthorized. This season, instances of non-compliance will be documented, identified, and reported when warranted. Also, homeowners will be advised of the responsibility for ensuring their contractor complies. Erosion, site damage left, and trespassing may result in enforcement. Thank you. Cool. So now on this year's cycle, as you can see, we have a map on the left. This year, the 6-year cycle will happen at the bottom portion of the association in red. You can see some all of the streets. You can find this map online by typing Defensible Space Tahoe Donner Association and then just look for the link to it. Otherwise, please take a screenshot of it. This program by itself alone is around 1,000 properties. We're looking on starting inspections at the end of April, beginning of May. And you can expect us to do around 15 to 20 inspections per day. We usually start at lower elevation. However, this year, everything is melting so fast that, yeah, we might start at higher elevation. So still not sure where we will start. As I was saying, last year, the brush component was the biggest one. You will still find some brush throughout this cycle area. However, the tree component will be the biggest. I remember in 2024, it was a similar area, and I think we inspected around 1,400 properties and removed, I think it was like 40,000 trees. And, you know, that goes from trees that are as high as 5 feet high all the way to very big trees. But anyways, you can expect a lot of tree removal as well as lean being away from the roof, and we will get into those specifics later. Next slide. So yeah, here we put, you know, a quick contractor's best practice list, and I think we did it 2 years ago, and we find that people that follow these steps receive compliancy on their first reinspection. Of course, we hate to have to go out there, fail, and have you guys go back. It's bad for everyone. So yeah, let me go through it. So number one, access that defensible space report, know Tahoe Donner rules, and ensure that you read all the parameters. We've mentioned that Truckee Fire and us have some different parameters, and we'll get into those. Remember, the pictures are only examples, so look at that picture and then identify every issue that you see throughout the lot. Then if you have a foreman, someone that's responsible of your team, have the person look for the property corners. They can use Onyx or other apps to locate those corners. And then if you go to our website, you can find our plat maps where you can see the directional bearings to be able to figure out the lines on a property. So imagine you drop to that property, you grab Onyx, you go to the first corner, now open the plat map, see that directional bearing, pull out your compass, and then shoot a line. And from there, flag that line, you know. Some people use those little flags that go on the ground, other people use just some flagging on brush. But this really helps you guys or your team know where the boundary is to make sure that the work happens all the way to that point. Then, of course, complete the work, and then have that same person, you know, do the last checking, you know, grab that report and make sure that all the items were hit and that everything happened all the way to the boundary. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go through some of the most common defensible space issues, and that goes from zone 0, which is a 10-foot clearance, the 6-foot clearance for branches from the ground, brush spacing, tree thinning, scattered twigs and branches and pine cones, the branches overhanging the structure, firewood storage, and combustibles on the deck. Next slide, please. So I know that sometimes you guys don't take care of this, but it's good to at least inform the homeowner. And, you know, for firewood, we say stack it neatly 30 feet away from the house. And make sure that that firewood is split. We don't allow rounds to be left on the property. Now, if the rounds are the same size of splitted firewood, that's fine. And in the case that they want to leave it within those first 30 feet, just like Truckee Fire, make sure that it's perfectly covered with a fire retardant tarp, that there are no holes that you cannot see through it. Thank you. Next one. Now for zone 0, we do 10 feet from structure, and that goes for dead vegetation, like the picture at the top on the right, pine cones, pine needles, etc. So it should be down to bare dirt or rock, hardscaping, but also for any landscaped or brush that we may find. Now, we understand that some homeowners might give you a tough time when you tell them that they need to remove that stuff. So you can always send them our way, and we will explain why this is enforced and why it needs to be removed. Next slide, please. Combustible materials on the deck. This is simple. Unless it is steel, it can burn. So anything that's under those decks, and this is part of zone 0, right, needs to be removed. So lumber, plywood, that needs to be gone. Next slide. Scattered twigs, branches, and pine cones. We're not going to ask you to, you know, pick up every single pine cone that you may find in a property. However, if we see pockets with excess of those, yeah, please clear them out. Regarding pine needles, we do not ask that you rake the whole property, but if there are areas with more than 2 inches in depth of pine needles, those need to be taken care of. Next slide. So yeah, trees tagged for removal. As you know, we tag with orange flagging the alive trees that need to be removed, and we spray paint the dead trees that we find in a property. On the right side, however, you see a picture of a lot of small trees, small firs that are not tagged for removal. However, we require that those are also taken care of. In the report, you will find that we X them out, but there are so many that we're not going to tag all of them. Just know that if a tree is under the canopy of a larger tree or the drip line, it needs to be removed. Next picture. So branches clearance from the ground. Yeah, we say 6 feet of clearance for any tree that's higher than 15 feet. What does that mean? That any branch that's hanging past the 6 feet needs to be removed. So if a branch is growing at 10 feet and it's hanging past the 6 feet, that branch needs to be removed. And the same logic is applied to trees that are smaller than 15 feet in height. But in this case, we just say a third of the canopy of the tree. Overhanging branches. So here is about creating a 10-feet buffer all around the property. We talked about zone 0 on the ground. Let's talk about aerial, right? So cut those branches that are going past the 10 feet. So even if the branch is further than that, just please cut it from the trunk as it is best practice. For trees that we are not able to limb them up to get to that 10-feet buffer without removing more than 50% of the live canopy, we will tag them for removal. And you will see that tree tagged in that case. A quick reminder, it's difficult sometimes, thank you, on the field to, and more from the ground to see what 10 feet look like. We say 10 feet, it's as tall as 2 people. And, when in doubt, go an extra foot on these overhanging branches because we have failed a lot of properties that have actually done some limbing, but they are still within that 10 feet. Next slide. Yeah, so requesting a tree permit. Sometimes we have missed a tree that you believe needs to be removed. Sometimes the property owner talks to you and they want to remove another tree. In those cases, please let us know, request a tree removal permit. You can type Tahoe Donner Association tree permit online and then just fill up that form. If there is an existing defensible space inspection already, we will just add that tree to the report with a double flagging and saying optional. But if there is no report, defensible space report, then we will issue a tree permit. And just to let you know, we are using the same format as the defensible space inspections to issue those tree permits. Tree permit standing alone will have a disclaimer that says, hey, this is only a tree permit, this is not a full defensible space. And you will also see some language on this on the automatic emails that we send. Next slide, please. So brush removal, these look more like last year, but you might still find some properties that have a lot of brush. But let's go through some of the parameters. So please pay attention to the structure at the bottom. As you can see on the first 10 feet, no brush, no landscape, nothing whatsoever. Then we go to 10 feet to 30 feet where you can have clumps up to 5 feet in diameter with a minimum spacing of 20 feet in between them. And then from 30 feet to the lot line, we're saying a maximum diameter of 10 feet with a minimum spacing between them of 15. We always recommend that everyone uses a mosaic pattern as it may be more efficient and also prevent some erosion issues on slopes. And then I left a small infographic at the right bottom corner. Just a reminder, any brush under tree canopies or the drip line needs to be removed, just like the small trees that we saw earlier. Next slide. Of course, if you have any question, please contact us. We strongly suggest setting up a few meetings with us on your first properties for the season, so that we can, be more clear if you guys think that we're not being clear on any of our parameters. And, helps you and it helps us stay accountable with each other. So please send us an email to defensiblespace@tahoedonner.com or call us, and yeah, let's schedule a meeting with Nate or I. Next slide. Regarding requesting re-inspections, we will always be out re-inspecting on day 45 after the initial inspection. However, if you send us a contract, we will give that property an extension due date, and we will wait for you to let us know, or the homeowner, that the work has been completed. But yeah, if you guys don't send us that list and that message letting us know, then we will be out there on day 45 to inspect, to do the re-inspection. Of course, if you want to request any re-inspection early and you didn't send us a contract, you can always go to Google, type Tahoe Donner Defensible Space, click on that inspection program link, and then see the blue box, request a defensible space inspection, and we will get it. This is the fastest way for us to get out to the field, as it comes to our software, and then our admins delegate them to the inspectors. We are on a first come first served basis, and this is the first thing that we look at. Okay. Next slide. Cool. And before I finish, I made some notes of some of the questions that I saw earlier. There was a question about landscaping and plants. I think I made it clear, but a reminder again that in Tahoe Donner, we do not allow any landscaping or plants within Zone 0. Then there was a question about limbing aspens away from the roof. And we do treat those aspens as any other large stem tree. And we will ask that those aspens are limbed up 10 feet away from the roof. And that also helps reduce the leaf buildup on the building. In some cases, we may tag aspens. We are not going for those trees, for those deciduous trees, but in some cases we may do tag aspens, but you will see them with the flagging. And it really depends on the mortality in the area and the density that we may see. But in anyways, we always will put some guidance on the report about this, as this is not something that we do a lot. And yeah, that's it for me. So thank you so much for listening to us, and let's schedule some meetings, okay?
Thank you so much, Paul. All right. Now we're going to get back into some Truckee Fire Measure T program updates. So as far as defensible space inspections go, our calendar for general requests is open, and we have appointments starting mid-May. The real estate calendar is open, so you might be seeing some requests for work completed on real estate properties, as those inspections are currently being done. We are still rocking and rolling with our home hardening rebates, and we are still documenting those recommended upgrades for people on their reports. So if that's something you're interested in adding and incorporating into your business, we definitely have a need for it in the community. Green waste disposal, we will definitely touch on, but we still have our buffet of green waste programs up and running for residents, curbside pickup, green waste drop-off days, we'll touch on those. And then self-haul to ERL, we'll also touch on. So we'll get into some details on green waste. Education and assistance, we are still doing our DSpace assistance days. So if we find a community member in Truckee who lives here full time, and for whatever reason they might be elderly or disabled, or for whatever reason they're struggling to get their defensible space work done, and they have a need, we will go into the school district, teach kids about defensible space, and bring them onto property to help us out. It's a really, feel good day of community involvement and getting the kids involved in fire safety and helping out their neighbors. And then we also have a dead tree fund available to support full-time Truckee residents, which we will dive into in some later slides. Okay. Like I said, real estate inspections are open. General inspections are available starting May 11th. We have been getting appointments booked, so I'm not too sure if May 11th is still available. If just know they became available mid-May. Okay, green waste disposal options. We have our curbside pickup, which we'll get into. 6-yard dumpster rebate if residents want to rent a 6-yard dumpster, put things like pine needles and pine cones in. We will reimburse them 75% of the cost for that. Our fireways communities, we're always trying to encourage them to do community work days, and we will reimburse them for 30-yard dumpsters in order to get that work done. And each fireways community has up to 4 that they can rent per year. So we're really trying to push that program. Town of Truckee residents have their green waste carts, of course, and then we also have self-haul to ERL. A little note on the dumpsters as well for folks who live in unincorporated Placer and Nevada County. They can get 2 6-yard dumpster rebates just because they don't have the same access to the Town of Truckee green carts. And then we have our drop-off events. Curbside pickup reservations open on March 30th. 75%. Okay, we already went through that. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Eric to get into some intent around our green waste pickup program.
All right, everyone, this shouldn't be a surprise. I sent this email out last August to everyone on the list. We're sticking with that same communication I said last year. We're really updating proper use of the Truckee curbside green waste program, and then it really is intended for residents rolling up the sleeves, doing defensible space work themselves. So it really is meant DIY, neighbors helping neighbors, friends, family, firewise communities, that style of work going on. This program was never designed, never funded, and never equipped for contractor scale biomass disposal. And it was never meant to replace contractor chip trucks, chippers, and dump trailers that are an essential part of your all business if you're running a licensed operation. So what I will say is we have a handful of licensed and maybe unlicensed contractors out there that have just been using the program consistently. So my advice is to invest in the ability to chip or haul material. Contractors are generally expected to address all biomass generated from their jobs, or working with residents to use some of the other unique tools that we have available with dumpsters, 6-yard dumpsters, and some self-haul options. So I feel like this is going to be good. We're going to be leveling the playing field for competitive bidding. So that way every contractor is bidding on the same job for removal, compliance, and disposing of biomass. Most of the time, customers tend to want the material gone, but you all know in this business there still is a market, sometimes a small market, for wood chips and mulch. And if you're offering free drop-off of wood chips and mulch at people's houses, please educate them on where they can and cannot use that material so that we're not coming back out and then telling them to remove a bunch of wood chips out from underneath their deck and away from zone 0. That would help us out a lot. And I'm just going to say this bluntly, more than likely, if you're generating a large pile of trees, tree limbs, and brush, you should be a licensed contractor because you're doing tree service work, and it was probably more than $1,000. So follow California State License Board requirements, and let's all make this a professional, competitive, solid line of work to support our residents. And my big goal is I really want to keep this tax-funded pickup program available free for residents, neighbors, and friends who are doing this work together. Can't go without saying, I'm not naming any names, but this is the crap we ran into last year. I mean, we saw a pile that blocked a complete travel lane of a major residential street. We saw piles that completely covered paved driveways. Imagine being the grapple truck operator trying to pick up a pile with a 6-foot, 1-ton metal grapple that's located on someone's beautifully resurfaced driveway. Hard to do. We found stuff stacked up against wooden power poles with transformers in them, completely blocking stormwater drains, covering landscape features for the grapple truck to find, like rocks, boulders, other plants, irrigation systems. And we even found a pile that completely made a fire hydrant disappear. So lucky that the grapple truck operator saw the stake and didn't just go and snap a fire hydrant off the ground. So this is the stuff that we're trying to prevent. So we appreciate you all working with us last fall and this year to keep these programs aligned and help our community do as much work as possible. Cool. New for this year is that we worked with TTSD over the winter. So there's a great self-haul program funded by the county and the town's taxes. So residents are able to drop off 6 cubic yards of green waste every year at the Eastern Regional Landfill, located there at Cabin Creek. We'll have a video coming up on the next slide, but new for this year is that it's digital. There's a QR code, and the resident has a whole process to make it easy to get this punch card over to a friend, a neighbor, or our contractors like you all. So that way, at least the first 6 yards of material that you process, will be free at the disposal site, just the transportation piece. So keep in mind with self-haul at the dump, it's yard waste only, no bags, no trash, no dirt. Any green waste is good, so that's good. You're not limited to just woody stuff. Each address gets 6 yards and it's fully transferable. So hopefully this helps us. If we're using the right systems as a community, we can be more efficient, effective, equitable for all. So with that, we're going to kick to another slide and let you guys watch a video on how this new transferable punch card works.
Righty. Is there no sound? Okay. Not sure why.
Here,
I'm
Sophia,
hearing
maybe
the
just hit
sound.
play, and if no sound picks up, I'll just narrate some stuff through it.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm hearing the sound. I don't know. Maybe yeah, let me see here. Options. Right-hand side. There we go. Okay. It's not letting me click. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Eric will be narrating the process for you. And I'll include a link to this video in the follow-up email we send. So yeah, sorry about that.
Cool. So this is their new website. You're going to be able to go to TTSD's website, and basically residents would be able to go in here and hit access their digital card. They're just going to be cruising through kind of where you find this on their website. So they're going to have a link up at the very top on TTSD's website, green waste drop off, and basically all a resident needs is their TTSD account number that they should be able to find on a bill, or if they have an existing account, it's easy to get to online. And then last 4 digits of any sort of phone number that they've had associated with their TTSD piece. So top right corner is where you'd find it on your bill, or online if you already have an existing account. You jump into this portal. It gives them updates on their property, their address, names, all that, and then it lets them know how many yards they have left for the season. Of course, the season ends end of October. So they're keeping this program kind of fully available for how many yards actually get dropped off for that resident. If you have more than one property, you're going to be able to cycle through that at the top for which active property you're looking at. The resident can go in here and make sure to update their names, their phone numbers, their email addresses, and choose for text notifications when loads are dropped off. If they're not doing it themselves, they can actually confirm that that was done and all 6 yards were used by the contractor. All right, you're going to use the create new slip button. A person can actually type in the landscaper or helper that they're using for the job, and then they can authorize the amount of yards, right? Is it 1 yard? Is it 3? Is it all 6? So they can kind of make a piece. It produces a QR code. They can print it, text it, email it, send it right through the site. So it should be really easy for a resident to get in here, list ABC contractor, throw in the email or text that you're giving them for your foreman, print it, whatever you guys need. Knowing this process will help you communicate this with a resident, and then they'll be able to kick it over to you. Probably everyone's going to be using it mobile, so your foreman's going to be able to use that QR code right when they show up at the ERL to drop off those yards related to those address, and they have kind of all the back end information on their side showing that the resident went in, they generated the code, and they released it. Residents can revoke it, cancel it, so if their contractor changes or things like that. So it's a pretty solid tool for the community to use. It keeps the history going for the season and for other years. And if anyone needs help, TTSD has a solid hotline that can help residents get into their account and make this QR code punch card deal work. All right, professionally narrated video I didn't make.
Thank you, Eric. Sorry about that again, guys. I'll be sure to send the YouTube link to this in our follow-up email. So, okay, continuing on with green waste pickup, we'll just talk about some simple guidelines for residents, and we'll show you guys some good example photos of acceptable piles and non-acceptable piles. So residents have to have their pile ready for pickup before making a pickup request. The material needs to be stacked neatly at the curb of a public road with cut ends facing the street. Stacks kept under 6 feet high. They have to have 3 feet of clearance from hydrants, snow poles, utility boxes, trees, retaining walls, etc. And we must ensure 15 feet of overhead clearance from power and communication lines. Please make sure materials are stacked in one continuous consolidated pile rather than multiple small piles. And eligible material is woody vegetation only, so shrubs, tree limbs, trunks up to 8 inches in diameter. That's like the shaka symbol that you make with your hand. That's about 8 inches. Either green or recently dead. And the material maximum length is 6 feet. Both green and recently dead material accepted again. So here's some good examples of acceptable piles. You already know why they're acceptable because I just told you, but we have nice consolidated piles, appropriate lengths, cut ends facing the street, good clearance from anything that the gravel truck might affect if it tries to pick it up. Some more good pile examples. Not accepted materials: pine needles, cones, bark, bags of any kind, roots, stumps, or root wads, scrap lumber or construction debris, tractor piles, commercial or timber harvest material, garbage, metal, rocks, firewood rounds. We don't want the gravel truck to pick up anything, damage its machinery, and then green waste gets ruined for everybody for the next week or so while they try to fix their machinery. So it's really important. The services for vegetation removed within 100 feet of a home or structure. Vacant lots are only eligible if they fall within that 100-foot zone of structures, regardless of property lines. Here we have some bad examples of piles. So you can see here on the left, they're just not neatly stacked. Lots of pine cones and pine needles, just random material that the clog tries to pick up. It's just gonna fall out and make a mess. On the right there, it's basically just crowding a pole. The gravel truck's not going to be able to pick that up. Some more ineligible material, big stumps and rocks in the pile there, scrap lumber in the pile there on the right, more scrap lumber in the pile there on the left, and right next to a pole in the pile on the right. You're starting to understand. On the left here, we have a massive pile, way too big, as well as it's encroaching on a pole. On the right, it's right underneath a tree. We got bags, we got trash bins. It's just a mess. Okay, our green waste drop-off events. We have our first one coming up May 29th in Tahoe Donner. And then we have another few June 27th, July 10th, both at the Truckee Rodeo Grounds. And then another one in Tahoe Donner, September 4th. So most important thing to remember with these green waste drop-off events is it's for dropping off residential yard waste. Please, no bags of, pine needles. Bags can be like emptied out once you bring them, but don't just, throw your bags there. Usually we'll be there helping you unload the bags. No rocks, no dirt, no commercial yard waste, rounds larger than 24 inches, no stumps, no boards, no trash. Last year we had somebody bring like 2 trailers full of horse manure. So please don't do that again. That was really miserable for us all to deal with. Other than that, that's pretty much it on green waste drop-off events. And I'm going to throw it back to Eric to talk about our home hardening rebate and our dead tree fund.
I'll keep this one light, but we do have a $2,000 home hardening rebate out there. So if you're one of our unicorn contractors that does, tree service, defensible space, landscaping, and handyman or general contractor work, maybe this one's for you. But we'd really like you guys to think about the main priorities, which are fence, zone 0 hardscaping, tarps, and fences. If this is something your business is interested in, please email us. That's here, hardenyourhome@truckeefire.org. We'd love to see more contractors and more talent lean into getting a lot of this work done. And it's a pretty easy business model. You do defensible space, you talk to a resident, you protect their home, and you say that 50% of the cost up to $2,000 will be reimbursed by Truckee Fire as long as we follow the process. So we'd love to see more of this home hardening work getting done. And hopefully you all see that as we get more and more heavy lift D-space work done, it's time to shift into home hardening anyway. All right, this is something we launched last year. We got a dead tree fund available for full-time owner-occupied residences. So this program is really for our locals. That was kind of informed by our oversight committee and our board to keep it that way. So if you guys are doing defensible space work for someone that's local to the area, we will help cover 50% of those dead tree costs up to $2,000 per property. So if they have multiple trees, we're still within that $2,000 max. But I think we've got another slide that goes through the process here. We try to keep it easy to access the dead tree fund. We really want to meet on site in person with the resident, right? And that's kind of the way these programs work. We want to connect face to face. We want to vet them out, make sure they're local. And then we ask them to go out and, get a few bids from contractors. You do have to be a licensed tree service contractor to remove dead trees. So that is limited to just our C49, or if you're still rocking the C61 D49 license, that's cool too. You complete the work. Please make sure the application has a contract. We would like that photo of the tree removed, and we need it identified for just the dead tree work if they're doing other work on the property, and then we can get that rebate check back to the resident after they've done all the work. I think we cover it, just labor services for the dead tree portion. So if you're doing other work on the property, make sure it's a separate line item invoice for the dead tree removal and disposal type stuff. And for most of these dead trees, we're not going to be covering costs for like stump grinding, other landscaping, a replacement tree, or buying new tools if a resident's going that route. So we're really trying to make this program be something that we want to see dead tree removes, and we want to see our licensed companies come in, do the work, help our residents out. And I'm not going to read those to you. These are the documents you would need to get through the process with us.
Yeah, this is just running through essentially the required documents. So all this on our website. If you're gonna be removing a tree, just head to our website and make sure you have all the information you need. Okay, we're gonna get into some inspection access, how to navigate our software, the difference between a curbside and a full access report. So a curbside report is only what's visible from the street. We do these in our blanket inspections. As you all might know, we inspect every property in our district on a 3-year cycle. So we have certain areas we go through each year. People will get a door knock and receive a door tag on their front door. And those curbside inspections are not like going around the entire property. So it's not going to be including things that might be in the backyard. Photos are and findings are representative. So whether it's a curbside or whether it's full access and we just missed something, some little human error, we might not have captured every single tree that needs limbing, for example. So make sure that you apply the principles we discussed in this PowerPoint throughout the entire property. Full access inspections are either requested or scheduled, or we get permission to access during blanket inspections. We knock on the door, we say, hey, can we walk with you and talk about your property? And then we get a full access inspection that way. Or folks can grant right of entry on the back end, and we can go and do a full access inspection that way. So this is what it looks like when you get into your report. It's really important to identify whether it was full access or curbside. You can see here this yellow box is where you'll see full access inspection or curbside inspection. Little notes will be here for the resident. Photos in this report are examples of an issue that may appear in other places on the property, like I just said. So one note on property lines: if the report has items that are on the property you're not working on, you might run into this. We are not going to be recommending that, you know, neighbor A does work on neighbor B's property. If the limbs from the neighbor's tree are hanging over the house or the property line that you're working on, of course, we always recommend a conversation with the neighbor. That being said, property lines do run vertically as well. So that is now the neighbor's property, and they do have the right to remove any trees that are encroaching on their property. Okay, as far as property lines go, we do our best with the software we have. Our tablets that we use are around within 3 to 5 meters of accuracy, so that can make a big difference. Ideally, defensible space goes across property lines because all neighbors are on board and taking action. But when you sign a contract, of course, your work is going to end at the property line. So a pro tip: if you happen to be talking to property B while you're out working on property A's defensible space, you can always often find that they have defensible space work that needs to be done as well. And you can create some more business for yourself that way by trying to get defensible space to cross property boundaries and bring up the entire community. So this is what it looks like on our side of the software that we use. You can see we're dropping pins every time we see an issue on a property, trying our best to work with the software we have to geolocate ourselves within the property lines. But again, it's not always completely accurate. So to access the report, you're going to go to truckeefire.org/dspace, and you're going to click on Access My Report. The property owner should have given you a access code. It's like a 6-character letters and numbers code. You're going to enter that along with the property address, and voila, you're in. We'd also recommend logging in and creating an account in Fireside. So it gives you that option right here and up in the right corner there, because you can log into your account and view all the properties that you've been working on that way. So it's a really kind of like user-friendly feature, especially for contractors who might be managing multiple properties and doing DSpace on a few different spots. So inside of the report here, we have the inspection summary. You can see here it's going to give you a rundown of how many violations you have. And then, like I said, it shows you what level of access we had. It's really important that once you click into violations, make sure you press the arrows. If you see any arrows or dots, that's indicative that there's multiple photos. So remember that, look at all the photos. And then it's also really important that you click into each violation itself, because you'll be able to see more details. Oftentimes, inspectors will leave more specific notes and instructions outlining what they want you to do specifically. Or the software itself will include a just kind of automatic, more thorough description of what we are looking for when we select that item. So probably going to get a lot more out of going into each individual violation rather than just viewing a summary and calling it good. Okay, if you're gonna upload photos of the work you've done, the resolution photos, we had a lot of great examples of what those look like that we'll accept. And it's also a great service to add for your customers. They would really appreciate if, you know, you guarantee a compliant report, and then also you could offer that you go into their report for them and you take pictures of your work, and bada bing, bada boom, they have a compliant report now, and they don't have to worry about it until the next time we inspect. So you're going to go into the correction checklist here on the left-hand side, and all those issues that were on the report you're going to see in a list. And then when you click on Mark Resolved here, circled, it'll pop up with an opportunity for you to upload or take a photo of the work that was done. Downloading the report and the checklist, you're just going to click on Download Report right under there, under the correction checklist there on the left-hand side. And the last time we polled this a couple years ago, it sounded like about a third of you were submitting photo resolutions. So again, great service to add for your customers, something they'd probably really appreciate. So it might be worth a few minutes at least to poke around in FireSite and figure out how to do that. I'm going to pass it back over to Eric for some expectations.
Cool, thanks. So just, in general, we love the work that you guys do in our community. You guys are a huge partner, right? We know we have some communities that as much as 75% of the defensible space work is being done through contractors. So with that, we appreciate it, and we just want to reinforce that we want you guys to work within your scope, your ability, your license, and your insurance. Please comply with Cal OSHA requirements like be safe, train, and train again, and use good condition PP&E. Your guys' profession is one of the most dangerous in the U.S., usually ranked top 1 to top 5 every single year. So let's make sure you guys are doing your job right. We want you to work with Truckee Fire and Tahoe Donner Defensible Space Inspectors, not Truckee Fire ambulances. So let's make sure we're doing this work safe, preparing our community for wildfire and keeping it safe out there. If your business doesn't reference it, there's a great guide from California Department of Industrial Relations on tree work safety guide, so feel free to check that one out if you want. And if you're working without a license, or if you're a licensed contractor and you have complaints or beef with an unlicensed contractor, the California State License Board is here to serve you all. So if you have questions about what you can and cannot do with a license, reach out to them. And if you have complaints over a competing partner, California State License Board is there for you to submit your complaints and to do investigations on that work. Please make sure you guys know HOA specific requirements. Tahoe Donner is the big one. Just think whenever you drive up Northwoods, you need to be talking to Tahoe Donner Association, not Truckee Fire. And then some of the other ones are like Sierra Meadows requires tree permits, and Martis Camp has some specific requirements too if you're in there. So make sure that you know that following all the laws is your and the landowner's responsibility. We're really here as a partner in wildfire prevention to get the information out there and connect the dots between our residents and contractors and get our community prepped for wildfire. And if you're not a part of it, we do have a local contractors association, albeit a lot more focused on custom home building than other services. But if you want to reach out to them, I know a few of you are members and are a part of the Contractors Association of Truckee Tahoe.
All right, thanks, Eric. So next steps for you all, the form that we use to add people to our list is going to open up after the webinar ends. You're going to find it at truckeefire.org/contractor form. And we'll send an email after this with that linked. It's not live yet, so don't go running to it right now and leave the webinar early. But that is the link that you're going to head to in order to fill out the form. That form is due by close of business Monday the 13th, this coming Monday. So if this is not filled out by the 13th, you will not be included on the list. When you do submit your form, be sure to triple check your entries, and the recording link will be shared shortly as soon as we get done with this and get it downloaded and uploaded. The list will be updated, posted, and circulated by Monday, April 20th. All right. Thanks so much. But before we close out, let's make sure that we have some time for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see what might have come up in the chat.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, Sophia. So we've answered a bunch of questions in the chat. The only outstanding one was from Tyler at Alpine Arborist. And Tyler, the canopy spacing piece, it's tough. Tahoe Donner, absolutely. Tahoe Donner goes out. They have property corners. They mark just about every single tree that has to be removed to pass their D-space inspection. So when you're working with Tahoe Donner, thumbs up. They are crushing it and doing a great job to make sure that every tree that needs to come out comes out. For the rest of Truckee Fire, we're kind of taking a blended approach. The Defensible Space Code statewide gives us a couple options of going the strict separation method, which is the 10 feet canopy spacing, or there is some tolerance for basically doing like a shaded fuel break style of a treatment where you're maintaining more tree canopy, but you're really addressing ground fuel, surface fuel, shrubs, ladder fuel. So we're really trying to work with each individual property owner, look at the property and try to give them the pathway to get to compliance. But it is not going to be something we can do to train our seasonal defensible space inspectors to go out and mark every single tree and conduct that. So, you know, if you're working with people and you want some support, like please reach out. I got an extensive background in forestry. We have a registered forester, Dylan, on staff. Like if you get that unique customer that is wanting to thin their forest and get it done right, like we can absolutely be a resource to go out there, walk with a resident, walk with you, even bring some paint and kind of mark some trees, but probably not something that our general inspector is going to be able to do every time. Other than that, if there's more questions from this group, I realize we got like 5 minutes left of the time we had slated. Thanks for giving us an hour and a half of your day. Feel free to throw them in the chat or use the raise hand button in the top, and we're happy to keep the conversation and questions going and making sure we're doing our part to serve our professional contractor community as best as we can.
While people are sharing their hands, I wanted to jump in and sort of throw a couple of things into onto the screen just for anybody that watches this recording later. We had a number of questions come up, and this is a common one, so I wanted to throw it up on the screen about what is allowable for pine needles, mulch, and ground cover. Again, it comes down to the basics of the defensible space zones, and Eric has defined it really clearly for the general defensible space zones. Tahoe Donner has defined their parameters as well. As you guys know, we'll share the slides later, so you'll have access to these, and these are the standard links that you guys know where to find them. A lot of questions, as usual, about Zone 0, and what I want to share with you guys is, one, if you are wanting to keep track of the Zone 0 legislation and updates from the state, then I highly recommend that you follow the Board of Forestry's site, and I'm going to drop the link into the chat as well. This is where you will see, let's move that sharing bar. All of the information that is going to be shared from the Board of Forestry about Zone 0 updates. And they have a Zoom meeting coming up of their next meeting in a couple of weeks later this month. It's a great way to stay on top of what is changing and to speak knowledgeably to your clients about what is expected. I also would strongly recommend that for your own edification, you know, understanding why Zone 0, and to also sort of give you more of the like learn how to fish rather than just, you know, catch a fish concept to be able to answer a lot of these questions yourselves, is to understand why Zone 0. We just had a fantastic presentation from the director of IBHS, which is basically the research arm of the insurance industry. And Steve Hawks, the presenter, put it into words that made it really clear to understand. And, you know, even though we work in this field, we're always sort of trying to find better ways to explain to residents and clients why Zone 0 is so important. And we want you guys to have that information as well, so that you can, you know, explain to them why the work is important. And this is a great way to do it. So I strongly recommend watching this presentation. And then lastly, there were a number of questions about home hardening. And as Eric said, there's a big market for home hardening work within our area. We do have a box for you guys to check if you're providing this work, or if you're just interested in being on our list for, you know, home hardening related updates. Check the box on the form that you'll fill out following the webinar. We're not currently identifying home hardening providers on our list, but it's a way to stay informed. And then we also strongly recommend that you, as part of your CAP membership or registration, make sure that you register as a home hardening provider. I'm just going to show you, there are only 2 businesses currently listed as home hardening specialists on their registration directory page. So there's a lot of opportunity and there are a lot of people looking for that kind of work. The IBHS presentation that I mentioned also speaks to the importance of structure hardening and again gives a lot of good talking points. So if you're looking for understanding and better information about home hardening and that sort of thing, that's a great place to go for that. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to our team or any hands up.
No, it doesn't look like we have any more hands up. Sophia, do you want to share that slide again that has the link to where the contractor form will be? And we'll get that up. And with that, looks like we actually have one here. Hey, I just unmuted you, Justin. So if you, oh, looks like you dropped off. Cool. Well, it looks like that's all we have here. So we'll get, there's the link right there, truckeefire.org/contractor form to fill out the form to get us on your list and get us all the info. Keep in mind, this is going to be closed by end of business on Monday. So we're looking for you guys really just get this knocked out today, tomorrow, this weekend. We'll make sure we follow up with an email right here after this meeting to get you guys this information updated, get you this information, and we appreciate you guys serving our community and getting all this super important defensible space and tree service work done. So thanks for the partnership. We're looking forward to another big year of inspections and probably a lot of work with wildfire, probably hot on people's minds after a weak winter. So enjoy the day. Thanks for the hour and a half, and we'll see you guys out in the field.
We can stay on for a minute or two if anybody is being shy and not ready to put their hand up, but thank you guys so much. I also just wanted to add that about half of the registrants for today's webinar said that they did not attend last year's webinar. So we're really happy to have that amount of participation, and we see that a number of companies have multiple representatives from their company here. So that tells us hopefully this is informative for you guys. You're getting information out of this, and we really appreciate the partnership and your engagement with us.
Anderson, the contractor form is not live yet. We're going to make it live shortly.
I just enabled it, so you guys should be able to access that now.
Hey, Ty, so you got your hand up there. I gave you permission. If you unmute yourself on your end using that mic button, you can feel free to talk to us.
Yeah, got it. So I mean, this is really funny timing. I just actually saw one of your listings and applied for the Tahoe Donner Association online. So it was really funny. I was doing this presentation. I was wondering if you guys have seen that.
Yes. Yeah, you're talking about Tahoe Donner's kind of annual presentation this evening?
Yeah, there was like an Indeed listing online, and so I applied for a job with you guys. And I thought it was really funny that I'm doing this presentation with you today.
Well, you said you applied for a defensible space specialist position with Tahoe Donner?
Yeah, it was like a supervisor or some position.
Oh, the forestry supervisor position. Yeah, we'll review it. Oh wait, I think I might have met you then, haven't I?
No, I mean I just applied Monday. So
Cool. Well,
and
we
then
will
I had
review
this
those.
meeting today. I was like, wow, this is really odd timing, but here we go.
Perfect. Well, thanks for your interest. We'll make sure to review your application.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to do all of you guys work for Tahoe Donner?
Well, this is Truckee Fire.
Okay.
Yeah, and Tahoe, I'm the only representative from Tahoe Donner right now here in this call.
Oh, right on. Okay. Well, yeah, I just thought that was super funny, so I thought I'd just mention that. And yeah, I mean, I'll probably give you guys a call if I don't hear from you in a few days, and we'll just talk about it.
Sounds good. I'll keep an eye. Thank you.
Right on. Thanks, Paul.
All right, looks like the form is now live. Anybody waiting on that update? Maybe try it right now, Tyler. Sorry about the back and forth with that.
Yeah, if you've already been trying to get in, go ahead and just refresh that page and you should be able to access now. Looks like people are able to access. Thanks for being on top of it. We look forward to seeing all those responses filter in.
We have one question. What's the average processing time for homeowners to receive the 50% up to $2,000 reimbursement? Brittany, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of context on the process. So step one is having a full access inspection. Therefore, the residents can identify with an inspector what exactly would be eligible for that rebate. The upgrades are done by either the homeowner or a contractor. The resident will submit that application and they're reviewed within 2 to 4 weeks. Typically, it's about that 4 to 7 day mark that's reviewed. And then if there are any additional kind of missing links, I review all those applications. So I reach out to the applicant and typically they can get their reimbursement checks within about 4 weeks of the application being submitted.
Anybody have any other questions while you got us? You got a panel of 3 of the 5 staff members here. If you guys have any questions about the programs we mentioned, anything else before we close the webinar? Cool. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you in the field. Thank you for all the work that you do and for the collaboration with us. Oh, we got another one. Does Truckee Fire have any stats on how much work is done by contractors versus homeowners? Brittany, I don't know that we have any particular way of collecting those stats. Through our green waste pickup program, we do ask self-reported whether they spent time or how much money they spent preparing their pile, which gives us some indication, but that is really just looking at via usage of the grapple truck program. But anecdotally, I think Eric mentioned probably 3/4 of the work is being done by contractors. And part of that is because we have such a high number of non-primary homeowners properties up here.
Yeah, I think you hit that nail on the head, Maria. We will sit tight on here until 10:40 on the dot, and then the event will be ended.
Justin asking about a subcategory. We have not in the past. We're probably not going to this year add a subcategory for home hardening on the service providers list. But as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it is a box to check on the form to sort of be added to our in the background list for our own information about how many providers are also offering those services. And we are from time to time sharing updates directly to the email list that we have, that we create from that. So add your name to that. If you already submitted the form and forgot to, then just shoot us an email and we'll add you to that list. We do encourage you to connect with Kat and get the home hardening category added to your registration so that you show up there. And we are hopefully working with Kat this year on developing some sort of how-to guides, but our home hardening page has a ton of resources and information about home hardening projects, best practices for the right way to do this home hardening work. And there's really a deficit in that market right now because a lot of it is best practice rather than industry requirement. So I encourage you to explore our home hardening website. And I think we popped that link in before, and it'll be included in the follow-up email of the access to our home hardening page.
All right, everyone, we are at 10:40 for the 31 folks still here. Thanks for tuning in today, and we will see you in the field. Have a great rest of your Thursday.